I love the Europeans for believing that their wines can't be emulated, but if that's a truth, Americans need to have that too. Zinfandel is the one grape that California does better than anywhere else in the world. And I'm proud to say that, just how proud a Burgundian should be able to say that about Pinot Noir.
Hey, this is Harman Skurnick, and welcome to another episode of Skurnick Unfiltered. Today I have with me Jamie Schwartz, who is the ambassador for all things American when it comes to wine. How you doing, Jamie?
I'm good. I do dabble in spirits, but that's, personal consumption.
Dabbling aside, we're going to talk about wine today, and we're going to talk about one of the most influential winemakers in our portfolio, and that's Tegan Passalacqua, who you recently sat down with. Tegan is the longtime winemaker for Turley Wine Cellars, and now you can say longtime owner and winemaker of his own brand, Sandlands.
Yep.
He is one of the most interesting winemakers that we represent. I think everybody who comes into contact with him and listens to him speak about the history of Napa and grape growing and farming and winemaking, it's just intriguing. I can listen to him for hours.
Absolutely. I learn an incredible amount on such a wide array of topics anytime that we spend time together. Undoubtedly, he is such a historian on California grape growing going back to the 1800s, with Turley and Sandlands. He's working with vineyards that were planted at that time, and you can really track the evolution of the immigrant story of America through these plantings, and it's really amazing to hear him touch on that.
I would even go as far as to say, I don't know if there's any greater authority on the history of California grape growing and winemaking than Tegan. I don't know anybody.
I struggle to come up with it.
So whether it be Turley or Sandlands, I think there's a theme that runs through both of those brands, I believe, and that's old vine vineyards that they source and or own, organic farming, mostly dry farmed, head trained, sometimes field blends. But I mean, without Turley and without Sandlands, maybe some of these vineyards wouldn't even exist today. Isn't that true?
100%. I was on a trip with Tegan in Lodi and the Sierra foothills a few years ago, and it was post-harvest, and he hadn't been there since the harvest time, and he was just couldn't believe how many vineyards hadn't been picked. And then there was also all of these fallow plots that were there, and the thought process is for these unpicked vineyards, they were likely going to get ripped out, converted over to something like maybe almond farming or something. So these amazing 100-year-old vineyards are going the way of the dodo bird. It's really sad.
It is sad. And like I said, without Tegan and without Larry Turley, many of these really prized vineyards may not even exist today, because I know that they have a great relationship with the growers. They pay them more and keep them in business. And so we have them to thank for that, because those wines are just phenomenal. Of course, Tegan specializes in Zinfandel. Turley is primarily Zinfandel, although there's Petit Syrah and other grape varieties as well. And with Sandlands, there is quite a variety of varieties, including Carignan, Trousseau, Cinsault, and on the white side, Chenin Blanc. I think with Sandlands, he's more focused on Lodi, in the Lodi area. He bought a vineyard in Lodi.
Yes.
Right? And so I think he's really, really focused on that region and trying to preserve vineyards there through Sandlands. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think he has heavily invested in the hopefully future success of Lodi in buying a vineyard property, which we talk about on the episode.
Kirschenmann, it's called.
Exactly right. He's also planted further east up in the Sierra foothills, and so he has some new property up there as well. But so he still maintains his home and his day job in Napa, but he's heavily invested in the success of Lodi going forward.
No doubt. I remember when we first met Tegan, he told us that he had interned in South Africa. And Tegan is the first one ever to mention to me the winery Molyneux, which we represent now nationally. He told us those wines are incredible, and we went after them based on his recommendation. And of course, they're a leader in quality in South Africa now. I think he's also done a internship at Alain Graillot in their own.
Yeah.
So on that note, why don't we sit back and let Tegan do the talking? And I think everyone on this podcast will really, really enjoy listening to him as much as I do.
Without a doubt.
Let's do it.
I'm with my dear friend Tegan Passalacqua. Tegan, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Love it here. Yeah.
Yeah, we love having you in New York. A lot of the time that you and I talk, you're in your truck.
Right.
You're covering some serious ground. So, like, can you just set the stage a little bit more about how far you're traveling, a couple of your favorite vineyards or something in various pockets around the state?
Well, for Turley, we're lucky to work with the Duprat vineyard up on Mendocino Ridge. So that's going out to Elk. It's planted in 1920 in the middle of a redwood forest, at like 1,600 feet.
And what, that's like 4 hours from San Francisco further?
Something like that, yeah. So you go up to the town of Philo, and then you kind of go Philo Greenwood Ridge, which goes over to Elk. I love that vineyard. That's the furthest north that we work with. And then the furthest south is the estate down in Paso Robles that we have. I'm born and raised in Napa, but I kind of have this whole other life out in Lodi where I bought vineyards. Once I got into wine, I realized that I loved vineyards and I loved old vineyards, and it was just a dream to own one day. And there's plenty of old vineyards in California I wanted to own, and then you get what you ask for sometimes. And in 2012, I was able to purchase the Kirchenman Vineyard out in Lodi. I've told this story a number of times, but it is a story that almost makes me tear up every time I tell it, because the Kirchenmans were Russian Jews who were from Odessa and like kind of escaped persecution and came out to the United States pre-World War I. And Kirchenman, the family name, translates to cherry man, but they also were grape growers in Odessa. So the woman who sold me the vineyard had a couple photos of like her great grandparents with like old head train vines in Odessa.
Crazy.
It's just really kind of neat stuff. I've been doing numbers on vineyards to purchase for like 5 years. And I'm like, this is what I can pay you. This is it. And she's like, that does not work for me. And I was like, okay. I'm like, I'm not going to agree to something that I can't afford. And then the next morning, literally at like, I don't know, I think it was before 7 a.m., I got a call driving to work, and it was her. And she was like, when we left last night, I drove by the vineyard, and I just know my brother, my dad, and my grandfather would want you to have this vineyard.
Oh.
And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, if your offer still stands, let's go for it. She's like, I know that like you want it. And like, she's actually been building schools in Peru with the money. So she's this lifelong teacher, and like, she just loves seeing her family name on the vineyard. It's just really important to her. And it's just been like a truly beautiful relationship that she's happy and I'm happy. And the family name is still kind of carried on in that area.
And the original vines went in
1915.
Crazy.
So her grandfather had planted it, and then her dad farmed it his whole life, and her brother farmed it his whole life. He had died in 2004, and he had a couple plots of old own-rooted Zinfandel. And I'd met him, and it was then 8 years later that I kind of started a conversation with his sister, and I was able to buy a 20-acre piece from the family.
Turley's been working with various single vineyards for how long? Like, I mean, have these Zinfandel vineyards always carried the family names, or is that something that like Turley kind of helped spearhead, or how?
Yeah,
what's the
I would say, it probably starts back with Turley was the first winery. I mean, Turley and Bialy, to focus on like Napa Valley old vine Zinfandel. Turley started in 1993 with that, so we're 33 years in a time when like Napa Valley cabs were really flourishing. Some of them get to work with Cabernet vines that are like 30 years old, and we get to work with Zinfandel that's 120. Napa and Sonoma might have a little more cachet to them, but I mean, California wine, whether they like it or not, was based on the success of Zinfandel, like an unknown grape from unknown regions that really just ended up prospering in this like new world. Like, people didn't know what Zinfandel was. They started planting it with other varieties, and they're like, wow, this one does really well here. Zinfandel just thrived in like every region in California more than most things. And the story I tell is that Zinfandel was the red wine grape that did well before like modern technology, i.e. like refrigerated cellars. And there were places like the Santa Cruz Mountains that had cool caves tunneled into the hill that could make Pinot Noir and Cabernet without them having microbial issues. But pre-refrigeration, like the world of the Mediterranean wine world was fortified wines. That's the definition of to keep out intruders. And part of the way to do that was to add spirits. And I mean, Lodi and Napa, primarily Lodi, had a huge history in like fortified wines, but then there was this one table wine that kept coming up, and it's like, wow, it's tasting really good, and that was Zinfandel. And I mean, back to the reports from the 50s and 60s, there was this unknown wine that was like, wow, this is like tasting really good next to more well-known varieties being grown in California. And every European I know, when they come over to visit, they don't want to drink Sonoma Coast Pinot and Chardonnay, and they don't want to go to a French restaurant. They want to drink California Zinfandel and get a Gottsburger from Joel. You know what I mean? They want Gottsburgers and
Maybe
drink
some tacos.
Zinfandel. And us as Americans, we miss out on it. You know what I mean? We want to be Burgundian. We want to be Bordeaux so much that they're like, no, you're never going to be as good as us at those things. I love the Europeans for believing that their wines can't be emulated, but if that's a truth, Americans need to have that too. Zinfandel is the one grape that California does better than anywhere else in the world. And I'm proud to say that, just how proud a Burgundian should be able to say that about Pinot Noir. That's the one thing we do have. We have so many other things, but like Zinfandel is special, and I always look at it as like a comfort wine. It's delicious. You look at why Italian restaurants do so well, and like down times and in war times, like people want comfort food, and I feel like Zinfandel for Americans is that wine that gives you comfort. It's not anemic. It's not some cerebral wine that you have to sit there and think about if you like it or, did you pair the right thing with it? It's just, it's delicious. So Americans, unfortunately, you don't ever know what you have until it's gone. And I think, there's a lot of Zinfandel that's being ripped out, like old vines and all over the state of California. And I think once we get to a point where someone's like, oh, let's get Zinfandel, like, sorry, like we don't have any anymore. Like, what do you mean you don't have any? And it's like, unfortunately, I think that's kind of the way Zinfandel's going. So hopefully these great historic vineyards can stay in the ground, and then we can show the next generation that we have old vines, like some of the oldest vines in the world, and like we get to work with them. The wine we're tasting right now, like the Lodi Red Table wine, this is from 3 vineyards, average vine age of 126 years old, and all own-rooted, like surviving on their own roots and having a real pure expression of the place. The Cinsault from the Bechtold Vineyard, planted in 1886, that's historically known as the oldest living Cinsault vineyard in the world. It's 140 years old this year. And then the Spanker Carignan, that's own-rooted, planted in 1900. And then the third vineyard is the Kirschenmann Zinfandel, planted in 1915. These staunch, stubborn German farmers have like kept these vines into the ground. And we look at all the problems in the world of wine right now. Mm-hmm. I mean, all these vines have seen multiple world wars. They've seen Prohibition. What we're going through now is like nothing like winemakers went through during Prohibition. Yeah. In the last 25 years of wine growth has been like just up, up, up. And then it went further up during COVID. And now it's like leveled a little bit off. But everyone's like, well, isn't it just supposed to go up forever? And it's like, maybe, the temperature of the climate will, but not, wine sales. The people that are flailing, that have been in the wine industry for 15 years or 8 years and saying, this isn't fair. Like, you're not even like half of a generation through. And like a lot of us, and I count myself in this group too, is like, are a lot of takers. We get celebrated for the hard work of other people. And we look great when we work with 100-year-old vineyards that we had nothing to do with.
Obviously, like, you cherish these old vine vineyards, but you also recognize you're not only focusing on that through your day job and through Sandlands, but also there's a conservation aspect to the heritage.
The Historic Vineyard Society. Yeah, Historic Vineyard Society. Yeah, of course. Like, the point of that organization is to first identify and educate the public on all the vineyards that are over 50 years old in California, not just Zinfandel, but like any vineyard. We started it around 2010, and at that time it like was 1960, and it was a really good time because viticulture had changed so much after 1960. Pre-1960, most everything was like head trained and dry farm. We didn't have drip irrigation yet. There's some people who were using sprinkler irrigation or flood irrigation. There was very little trellising. There was some, but like very little. So, it was kind of just a kind of whole paradigm shift in grape growing. Like I collect a lot of old things. I have these viticulture posters from the 1873 World Fair, and it was France's Viticole Exposition. And phylloxera had been discovered 5 years before, but hadn't decimated France yet. And the amount of different training methods, like regionally throughout France, was so diverse. And that all kind of was lost through phylloxera.
In Europe, though, we get to see some of these ancient ways of training, maybe in Tenerife or in...
For sure, yeah.
But it's very small amount of
very,
the overall...
very small, right. And the reason we have those is because those vines were usually in sandy soils and didn't succumb to phylloxera. So like there wasn't a forced replantation of like the culture.
Yeah. There's a certain part of California that didn't succumb to that.
Yeah, and kind of, I like to say that the creation of California with the tectonic plates and the uplift of the Sierra Nevadas, when you think about the creation of the Sierra Nevadas, it's like these tectonic plates hit and pushed up, and what it pushed up was all this granite. You think of Tahoe and the Sierras, it's all this granite, and what happens now, it's at higher elevation, the granite, and it snows up there. And so you get snow melt, and then you get ice, and you get the ice to freeze into the nooks and crannies of the granite. And when it freezes, it breaks the granite very slowly. And then when it melts, it erodes the granite very slowly. It starts coming down all these little tributaries and comes down to rivers. And then it ends up all going out through the Golden Gate Bridge, and that's what the delta is. So Lodi is very close to the foothills. So it's all this kind of sandy soils that are decomposed granite from the Sierra Nevadas. So the creation of California has allowed for us to have areas that, because of these sandy soils from the granite, and that all harkens to like the name of Sandlands. It's like this was areas that you could have these old vines, and we can actually farm own rooted. Really, more than anything, like my 23 years at Turley has just been a true education of like California. I've been able to see everything, and like I have friends in every region we work in, and I get I can't imagine like a better place to have ever worked, you know what I mean? And to be able to see the state, and kind of really kind of formulate your own ideas and philosophies based on everything you've seen. Like Lodi is amazing, like just amazing agricultural place. I tell people like cherry blossom season out there is unbelievable. But like you go to Contra Costa and it is just like a foreign land. There isn't like a long cultural history of winemaking in places like Contra Costa as much as there is grape growing. It's these sandy soils, and you look at these vines and there's like nothing, no power around them, no water. They're just like there. And it's like, how are these surviving? America's still dealing with a lot of like antiquated prohibition laws. In Oakley, like you couldn't have a winery after Prohibition where like all the Contra Costa grapes are grown. And I think that's changed recently, but it's basically been that way for like almost 100 years. It's like you can grow grapes, but we don't want a winery here. So, I mean, there's still just weird prohibition laws that exist throughout the country. There was never like a small producer who made like 1,000 cases of wine like in his little shed and everyone goes there. And there's no Raymond Troyat of like Oakley. But there should have been, there really should have been. And Lodi is the same way. There's, some great pioneers who in the 70s, started making like a little bit of like small lot wine. I mean, one of them is the Phillips brothers that started making like Riesling and things like in the 70s. But unfortunately, neither of these regions have like old bottles that you can go to. And like, some friend of a friend, you go to dinner and someone brings a 1947 bottle of, Charles Krug Burgundy. Like part of what I'm hoping to do with Sandlands is that there will be bottles of like Lodi red table wine in 50 years that young people will be able to like drink out to dinner and be like, oh my God, this wine held up. Like, wow, this wine is like still great. And I know California wines can do that. I've had them, but a lot of these regions don't have that cultural safe deposit box of wines that we all feel so fortunate to have when we go to other regions in Europe and someone opens up an old bottle of wine and you really know that it's kind of like a priceless moment that like you get to share it with people you know and people you just met and like you sit there and smell and make, wow, this is amazing.
I feel really privileged to have had a chance to like sit with you on a few occasions now and get to taste through verticals and horizontals and like it's really exciting to taste the array of Sandlands. We've talked a lot about Zinfandel, but what are the other grape varieties that you're already working with that really get you going?
Well, obviously that would be Chenin Blanc.
Yeah.
I've made Chenin Blanc since 2011, primarily all from the original Amador vineyard. Another vineyard was planted for me up in a town called Fiddletown that's 2,000 feet in black schist. And then, of course, I love Cinsault. In 2024, I bottled 3 different Cinsauts. So I bottled the Bechtold Vineyard, 1886. I actually got the first time I got access to the Teldeschi Vineyard in Dry Creek Valley. They actually have the second oldest Cinsault in California, planted in 1953. And then
That's such a crazy gap between the ages.
I know. And
Yeah.
1953 is old. Like, I mean,
yeah.
there's only like one older Cinsault vineyard in South Africa than that. And then the Kirschenmann vineyard, I planted an acre of Cinsault back in 2018. I make that sometimes, but most of it goes into my rosé, the Kirschenblume. Clearly, like Carignan from sandy soils is just the best iterations of Carignan. It kind of rounds off all the rough edges that Carignan can have in the sandy soils. My friends, the Pelagos, there's 2 Greek brothers who I adore in Lodi. Both of their parents were born in Greece, and they love wine, and they're grape growers. And they grafted over some Assyrtiko, the first to graft Assyrtiko in Lodi. And the first year I saw the Assyrtiko grow in Lodi, I'm like, I've seen so many white grapes grow in Lodi. I've never seen anything that grows as well as Assyrtiko. Lodi has 125 different grape varieties. It's got more grape varieties grown in the region than anywhere else in the world. One of the other projects I'm working on, I bought property up in the Sierra foothills. So most of the vineyards in Amador County are around 1,500 to 1,700 feet. Most of those soils are primarily based on granite. And up outside of a little town called Volcano, there's some lens of Aiken Cobbly loam. So it's the same soil you'll find on Pritchard Hill and Howell Mountain in Napa Valley. And so I bought 2 parcels up there that are, adjoining each other. One's 5 and one's 7 acres. And I've started planting Caricante, Norella Mascalese, and then because it's my, crutch or my guiding light, I planted some Zinfandel up there too, because I think I'll be able to understand the vineyard better through the lens of Zinfandel than anything else. Yeah. The Trousseau from the Sonoma Coast, the Bohan Vineyard, I think that most years can be the most ethereal wine I make, and it's just the drive back from Bohan Vineyard on like Highway 1 on the coast with fruit is like, I really feel like it's like you won the Super Bowl and you're doing the parade, and like there's just cows on the side of the road and you're driving by 101, you got like 4 tons on the truck and it's like afternoon and like you're just smiling. There's the ocean, windows down. Cell phones don't work until you get to a certain part. And then like you get all these text messages, you get back in the cell service, you have like 30 missed messages from the winery. And everyone's like, where is he? Has he been like partying all night? I'm like, oh, maybe half the night. But then it just takes so long and it's so far to get through. And then like you just call and be like, I'll be there at like 3. We got like 4 tons to crush, and that's usually like the last pick of the year. It's like everyone's kind of waiting, so. But for a while, you're just sitting there driving the truck, like really thinking you're in the Super Bowl parade.
Amazing.
So,
I mean, how do you split your time? Like, obviously you're involved in production, but your background is farming and you have property, you're developing property. So like, what is that day to day like?
It's day to day and day to night and day to weekend. I think in all honesty, I've been trying to grapple with that the last couple of years because I know that I've neglected like some people I love for this wine thing, and you get so into it at sometimes and so driven to do something, and then you're just like head down and you kind of don't see the casualties of like relationships go by. So yeah, I've been trying to deal with that. And I think probably at the age I'm at, I'm 48 now, like I don't have the same unbridled energy that I did 10 years ago. And that's like, I know I can do these things, if I just work harder, but like working harder is getting harder. So
I think you have your dream job.
Yeah.
Right? Between your day job and what you've grown from that and everything, it's really remarkable. A lot of people don't get to say that.
No, I do.
But it's hard when you're passionate.
But at a point, like you have to look at it and you're like, I'm being pretty fucking selfish, because I have this dream job and like it's so rewarding, like personally to me. It's not be careful what you wish with. It's just like, it takes time to realize that those are real life issues. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's kind of the work-life balance I need to start figuring out more. But
No, I mean, I love when we get to talk about things that aren't wine related.
Yeah.
You know, it's generally baseball and you
Yeah.
go into games with your boys.
Yeah.
But I love that you find time to do that and make it a priority. You know, I think that's super
well,
important.
I mean, I really mean it where I'm like, please share these wines with friends and those that you love. Because, I mean, that's to me, like, it sounds cliche, but like, I mean, there's nothing better than that.
Something that keeps me engaged with this job is the communal aspect
Yeah.
of it. You know, it's so important. When I interviewed Christina, you know, we were talking about how we all need to throw more parties and
Yeah.
beautiful wine
Yeah.
dinners. And I think that is super important. So we are very lucky. I am wondering, maybe this work-life conversation is also part of a pursuit of perfection, but do you think you've ever made a perfect wine, or do you strive to make a perfect wine? Have you had a perfect wine?
A perfect wine only exists if there's like an experience. I don't think I could ever say a wine's perfect sitting with 4 glasses in front of me with 30 people at tables doing a tasting where everyone's silent and no one can speak. I don't think I would ever consider one of those wines perfect.
Even if it was a 1945 Latoche.
Yep, I don't think like in that atmosphere, but I can tell you I'm looking over here at the Roca Rosé Our Pepe, and I had a dinner at my house in Victor, what we call Victor Book Club, with the 3 liter of the 07 of that. That was a perfect wine. Like everyone I forced to drink it. So we had Audie Badenhorst and Cristiana Tiberio. I had them present their wines, and we had like 20 people, 24 people sitting down, and like I poured that 3 liter, and I mean, everyone was like so ethereal. You know, I've always heard that they bottle the reserve barrels in large format. I don't know if that's true. Don't correct me if I'm wrong. I like to believe it. But like that was like just such a special wine in a special place that really kind of, you got to share, you know, I mean, large format, and you get to share. And I was kind of a little bossy where I'm like, okay, we did this, but for dinner, when we sit there and have the first course, everyone's going to drink the same goddamn wine. And that's why I have a 3 liter, and I have magnums of the same wine too. So I want everyone to be having the same experience. And that 07 Our Pepe, like I'll remember forever.
Amazing.
You know, just like that was like, to me, that's like perfect wine.
Well, I mean, I think on that note, we can cheers and call it a day.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very
Tegan.
much. Yeah.
Skurnik Unfiltered is recorded at Skurnik Wines and Spirits headquarters in the Flatiron District of New York City. If you found the conversation interesting, please consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a review. You can stay up to date on our show and upcoming events by following Skurnik Wines on Instagram and visiting our website at skurnik.com.